I'm ranking every boss in Constance by how hard they are to beat without getting hit. If you're not familiar with this game, Constance is a pretty good Hollow Knight inspired metroidvania. One of this game's highlights is that it does have some fairly difficult platforming challenges. As for the bosses themselves, they're all pretty gimmicky and platforming based. The way they work is that each boss will rotate through a set of moves while following a set rotation. This means that most boss fights can be beaten using memorization because they'll always follow the same patterns with little deviation. This does lead to fights that are more static than dynamic. Despite this though, I still had fun learning and mastering each boss. Now I'm just going to go over the ranking criteria quickly before I begin. I played this game using just melee, so my ranking will be based entirely on that experience. As this is a no-hit ranking, I won't be factoring in boss damage, but I will take into account boss HP and defense. Bosses will be ranked mainly on mechanical difficulty, so the size of a boss's moveset, how complex the moves are and how hard they are to dodge, boss aggression, and the overall flow of the fight. I will also take into account when the boss is encountered and what tools are available at that point in the game. So, with that out of the way, let's get into the ranking. At number 17, the easiest boss in the game to beat without taking damage is Cubicus, Recycler of Realms. This is the game's first boss, acting as a tutorial of sorts. This boss is very easy. It slides around the room and tries to drop on the player. These attacks have long wind-ups that are telegraphed, and the boss is pretty slow with obvious openings for attack. The only notable thing is at the halfway point it covers itself in corruption, so the paint stab is needed to remove it first. Overall, pretty easy to no-hit. Next up, at number 16 is Wounded Vessel. This is actually an endgame boss, but it's extremely easy, especially at the point when you face it. It's one of 3 bosses you fight before the final boss, and they're pretty much just warm-ups leading into it. This one is the easiest of the 3. It tries to drop on the player with falling debris, and it flies around shooting splitting bullets. Fairly simple and straightforward. At number 15, we have Corrupted Mind, another of the 3 bosses before the last boss. This one is slightly harder than Wounded Vessel. It jumps around leaving behind corruption pools that can be removed with a paint stab, and it has a meteor barrage attack. With each rotation, the meteor barrage does get more complex though. Other than this, also a very straightforward fight. Number 14 goes to Forsaken Will, the last of the 3 bosses before the final boss. This one is definitely the hardest as it's more complex than the other 2. It makes use of several different summons with their own attacks. It also has this laser cage attack. It's not too bad though, because the summons are all enemies encountered through the game, so I was used to dealing with them at this point. At number 13, we have the Maw Chase sequence. Now technically this isn't actually a boss fight with an HP bar, but it does do the boss intro roar, and it is one of 4 encounters required for the tiers. These tier bosses are kinda like the Lord Soul bosses in Dark Souls. Overall, this is a pretty easy platforming chase sequence, especially compared to harder platforming segments in the game. It did take a few attempts though to get the memorization down for the whole sequence. Next up at number 12, the Awe King. This is a range boss that likes to keep its distance by teleporting around while firing a variety of different beams. It also does the slowing attack to keep the player away from it. I found this beam attack the trickiest to deal with because there's a bit of a lag between the first beam and the second, which I dealt with by baiting the second shot. Other than that, a fairly straightforward fight. Most of its attacks look flashy but are easy to dodge and they leave the boss open. Next up, number 11 is the Manipulator Encore. This is a rematch fight, but I found it much easier than the first fight. The Manipulator is a fairly mechanically simple fight. It uses this bullet attack, and it flies around dropping explosives. I've always had trouble weaving through these kind of bullet attacks, but this one wasn't too bad, lots of gaps to maneuver. At number 10, we have Pelitus, Imperfection Incarnate. This is the only optional boss in the game, but it's pretty important because it rewards the double jump. This boss uses a mix of melee and range attacks. It also has a shield which blocks frontal attacks, which I dealt with by pogoing on its head. This is one of the few bosses in the game that has some variation. At the halfway point, it starts summoning these corruption orbs that make it much harder to maneuver. Like all other corruption attacks though, they can be removed with a paint stab. Number 9 goes to the Jester Encore. Like the Manipulator, this is also another rematch fight that's easier than the first. This boss uses a variety of different card attacks, where each set of attacks leaves the boss vulnerable. After hitting it several times during its vulnerable phase, it gets downed. The main difficulty with this fight is that some of the cards are fairly fast, with a lot going on screen. Some of the card moves leave very little room to maneuver, making it easy to get clipped for damage. At number 8, we have the Manipulator. Unlike the rematch, this fight revolves around the boss using summons. It will drop some summons, which once destroyed will trigger a climb where the boss can be reached by pogoing off the balloons. Overall, a very mechanically simple fight, but it can be annoying because summons always make fights much harder when going for a no-hit win. Next up, number 7 is Hypatia. From here onward, the bosses are much harder to no-hit. Hypatia, like All King, also teleports around the room while trying to keep the player at bay using ranged attacks. What makes this fight hard is the lack of space because the fight takes place on platforms. The most difficult part of this fight is this climb sequence here, where portals need to be taken to reach the boss. The issue is that there are several sets of portal routes, and it's quite easy to mess up and fall. Boss also heals during all this, so there's a bit of urgency. It took me many attempts to finally get the memorization down for the teleporting. At number 6 we have the Jester. The way this fight works is the boss will separate into 4 cards, and hitting one of them begins a sequence of card attacks. After several rotations of this, the boss mixes in corrupted cards that can be used to down it when hit. Some of the card attacks are pretty fast, so it does take some reaction speed to deal with them. And now we're at the top 5. At number 5 is Constance, the final boss. I rank this boss only at 5 despite being the last boss because most of its moves are taken from the 3 bosses before it: Wounded Vessel, Corrupted Mind, and Forsaken Will. As such, I was already used to dealing with them. It also has this attack where it shoots the ground beneath you, destroying the ground underneath, forcing the player to pogo while dodging the beams. Lastly, it has a climb sequence involving a lot of jumping and pogoing. Taking too long causes a nuke attack to go off, but if the boss is hit before it goes off, it gets downed. Overall, pretty easy for a final boss that acts more of a set piece than a challenging fight. Despite that, I enjoyed this fight, and I think it felt like a proper finale to the game. Next up, number 4 is Sir Bartholot, Remnant Warden. This boss has 3 different sequences, with the first being this derpy one. The boss hops around leaving exploding bubbles. If they're not destroyed quickly, it can be pretty easy to get overwhelmed. Next is where it spits out poison and the player has to climb and stay above it. Lastly, the most difficult part of the fight is this night phase, where he teleports around slashing and calling clones. The boss is pretty fast, and it did take me several tries to adjust to the timing. There's no variation in its attack speed though, so once I got the timing down, it was easy due to the consistency. Number 3 goes to Brian, another of the tier bosses. This boss is hard. Brian is incredibly overtuned for when he's faced. He's only the second boss in the game, yet he's much more complex and harder than the majority of the bosses after him. I can see this being quite the wall for new players. So he has these corruption orb attacks and lightning strikes. The hardest move to deal with is this summoning sequence. It starts simple enough, but with each rotation, the summons get harder to deal with. The last rotation even adds a corruption disc in. The boss is also invulnerable for most of the fight, only leaving itself open after this attack. So a fairly passive boss battle with a lot of waiting. Overall, this honestly feels more like a mid-game or even end-game boss. At number 2, we have Cornelius, Unbound Fury, another tier boss. This is the only boss in the game with multiple health bars. It's also the most mechanically complex fight. The first phase, Unbound Fury, has the boss jumping around the arena and using the spinning attack. The second phase, Unfettered Woe, was the hardest for me. It's a range phase where he uses this move and teleports around shooting projectiles. The teleports are pretty random, so it took a lot of attempts to finally get through them without getting hit. The last phase, Shattered Mentor, uses the moveset of the first phase while mixing in projectiles from the second phase. Each phase by itself isn't too bad, but having to do all 3 back to back was taxing on my concentration. The double jump was the MVP here, which definitely made this fight much more manageable. Overall, a challenging but fun fight, definitely the most dynamic boss fight in the game. Lastly, at number 1 is Lord Koba, the last of the tier bosses. This fight is chaotic. There's so much going on screen that it's pretty hard to track everything. I heard this fight was actually much easier on launch, but later patches added the falling debris and this corruption attack. This fight has the player go through several unique phases. The first is where the boss slides around the room as debris falls. I mainly clung to the wall while pogoing it when it got close. Next, it summons enemies, very annoying with the falling debris. It eventually throws a cube, which can be ridden and used to damage the boss. Lastly, it has this phase where it splits into 3, where each eye needs to be damaged. All these different phases and the chaos of the fight definitely put Lord Koba as the hardest boss to beat hitless in this game. And that's every boss in Constance ranked by how difficult they are to beat hitless. Despite being on the easier side for a Metroidvania, I still had a lot of fun with the game and no-hitting all the bosses. If you're interested in getting into no-hit boss challenges, which I do recommend trying, Constance is actually a pretty beginner-friendly game since none of the fights are overwhelmingly complex. If you'd like to watch my full no-hit boss fights for this game, check out the end screen or the link in the description below. And if you want to see more Metroidvania or Souls-like boss rankings and no-hit content in the future, feel free to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and until next time.